Hi, this is Ghaleon from Poker Imanium, and we now have 9 max sit and go single table coaching this time, and I'm moving those chats into good positions. So I have started quite a few games now. It's actually 8 running, and games are from $1.5 to $15, I think. And if you see the screen and everything works correctly, then please write something on the chat. And hi to Christian and Danita. Here I'm going. Seems to be somewhat tricky player. This is pretty much the bottom of my calling range here. Also good that there seems to be fishy looking guy on the BB, so we get usually him in the pot also. And this one is something that I'm definitely going to be folding because it's so connected that if the open raiser C bets here, he almost always have something decent. And well, we have some backdoors here, but I don't think there's really that much point to be continuing in the pot. I put also one $30 game into registering, but only 3 people so far, so might be just that it doesn't start that fast. Here versus 2 people, I'm going for over half pot. Even a bit higher here would be totally fine. Like up to 200 or so. And now we got practical nuts, so definitely going to continue betting. And I don't want to bet that huge here. I mean, if I bet 300, I can really nicely solve the river. Maybe he stays on the pot with bit wider range if I go for such sizing. And villain is definitely going to call, I think, ace queen or better, and might be calling even any ace sometimes. And here I checked into 4-way pot with my weak top pair, nobody bet, so I think my mate hand is already very often good enough, and I also got the flush draw. And here I'm going to be betting and calling if the villain shoves. And I go on quite a high sizing because if the villain has a king, I don't think he's ever folding it really. 3-4 suited here. If I had like 7-6 suited, I would call, but I think this is simply too low to be. Even though the pot odds are great, but and everything works fine. That's nice. And here, pretty standard sizing for me to ISO raise. ISO raise with the 3 PP sizing. Something like 90 to 120 is, in my opinion, good sizing. Even higher if we have reason to do so, like if we have a read that limper is practically always going to be limp calling. And this is pretty draw heavy board, unknown player. I will size it pretty big and be ready to commit myself if he raises. Here villain has not played so far, and when he sizes it like that, we basically have two options with pocket eights. It's either to fold or be ready to play for 4 stacks by raising. And here I'm going for pretty big sizing and still calling if he shoves. There's so much draws possible. 9x would not be a huge part of his range. Of course he might have something, some 9, but I would assume that from unknown player I still get value from 10x and a lot of draws pretty often. Even shoving here, it's a bit deep to be shoving actually, I think, because if we shove, most players will be folding all of those draws more or less, and we don't really want that. So problem of shoving here is that it can kind of overprotect our hand. The better hands will definitely call, but we want action from weaker hands. Jack 8 suited here. Oh, there's a couple of Reki guys behind. I was thinking of limping there behind of the one limper, but there was at least 2 active players in position, and I don't really want to. I think they will be raising quite decent range here, and I really don't want to be limp calling hands like that. Christian asking if I take the pie into account in decisions. I think in lower limits we can more easily assume that there is higher rate of fizzy players, so people tend to be overvaluing their like top pair hands and such, and often calls more with draws and so on. Again, hitting pretty nice here. We are quite rarely behind. And here I actually like this rebet because we do have. Well, it's quite close, but we are also from UTG, raised from UTG, so we usually get decent amount of respect. Other option is to just check and basically hope that we hit something. But decent spot to also see bet. And I think here when this Reki looking guy or Reki player check raises, problem here would be for continuing is that we have little idea if king or queen is out for us. And even like hitting 10 of spades might not be that great, so folding is pretty mandatory. And again, not really a spot where I assume players to be making really loose check raises when I see open from UTG and see bet versus 2 opponents. And here unknown player, I think I can be shoving here. Here's still some weaker aces to be calling. He has same hand actually. The other little line hit the 4, but he didn't have much stack. And pocket 3s here I'm going to see bet basically for trying to get the pot down. This is usually have not really hit that often on the villain range, and problem of checking this sort of hand is that all of the turn cards almost are bad for us, or very few improve our hand. And it's really hard to know where we are if villain, like, if we check the flop and villain bet turn, bet river. And even if we get called in that spot, I would usually be checking the turn and then evaluating the river, because like if there is no, for example, no flushes coming in and not that much cards that would likely improve his range, it's pretty nice spot to be bluff catching sometimes. And pretty standard call with the pocket tens when the villain shoves it here. It's usually a spot where we can somewhat discount the best hands from his range, and here I open any two because small blind is sitting out and this big blind has been really tight so far. So it will be very profitable for us. Well, I would say that in general, this is actually pretty interesting spot. The pocket tens. I'm going for c-bet here, but if he's not willing to be floating, he might not have much to call with really, because he shouldn't have that much aces in his range, and that's why I also go for check and let him bet if he does have some sort of float. I think check shoving here is going to be the best line, because if I call here, it's somewhat unlikely that he would be, if he has like pure air type of hand, that he would be betting again, and if he has some draw, he's usually going to be calling. With his hand, I think there is actually very little reason to be betting in the turn with 7-6 suited, because it's really tough to get called by verse usually, and you really don't want to get checks out on. But our line worked pretty nicely when he bet that sort of hand also. And in here, if we think about his like stack size here, I wouldn't really be folding if versus a shove. This is always a tricky spot when they go for this sort of sizings, but I'm not folding with that sort of sample on the wheel line. I don't really think he's ever folding, and this is kind of a problem that it might be a trap much more easily. And Christian says last time I had VIP status on the tables, so actually I haven't been using it for half a year or something, I think. Pocket 8, pretty close here, whatever we want to be opening. Problem is that if we face a 3-bet, it's pretty tough to play because the hand is not really that great. Would be my bottom of my range, pretty much the pocket 8 here on the UTG. Like when we are very early stake, I'm pretty happy to be opening all pocket pairs. In here, it's actually a really great spot overall, because this sort of player I think can be folding after his call, and this villain who shoves has been really active, so in this scenario I think shoving is going to be the best option. We are actually in pretty good shape, even though the boat got all in. But of course, always reading the stats that when we have this sort of, we don't have much of sample, but when he had played like half of his hands and like 30% has been a raise and so on, so there's good possibility that he's really overplaying quite a few hands. And for the knockout or non-knockouts, I would say that the knockouts tend to be softer games pretty much always, because not all recs are going to be playing them who plays the normal format. So I think in long run those are going to be more profitable. And here definitely shoving the 10-7 suited with that sort of stack depth. And here PP seems pretty tight, so let's try to steal. And here pretty wrecky looking player. I will be taking that spot. Can't really go much wider than that, but ace jack is going to be okay here. Villain calls here, he had been kind of tight. I don't assume much fold equity here, really, because I assume that he would be folding usually if he has like, let's say, queen 10 type hands. Maybe he could flat call some kings, but well, for the VIP status, I mean, especially in these sort of games, most recs will be knowing each other decently. And here, villain flats seems to be a bit pretty aggro. I'm actually going for check call or check shove if he gets small. Problem with this line is that we might be giving him free cards and he might be hitting 10, but it also enable him to bluff. And in the river, maybe he might be shoving with 8x here. I'm still going to be calling with my, as I planned earlier. Okay, threes here. We are a bit deeper with these blind players, so I'm going to open the hand. Here we have, I actually like to be checking here. If I see bet, it's kind of tough for him to be calling with much force hands. So let's go for delayed. Delayed C bet. With pretty small sizings, I want to give him the opportunity to be calling with weaker stuff. Of course, nasty if he now finds a shove here. It's pretty weird spot overall. Min raise. Okay, quite weird line that it chose to check the flop behind, in my opinion. I just thought that he might be overplaying some weaker aces sometimes, and when I don't see that flop, he might think that I don't have ace, so he might be bluffing sometimes. But of course, those min raises tend to be value, but then again, both odds are really great also. We have 6 tables now. Let's add few more. And here I raised. It's a plan to be calling versus the big blind, of course. When hit min 3-bet here, I'm going to call because of the pot odds. And here I go for open shove with the ace queen in the bubble and 2 racks on the blinds. I really don't want to be min-raise folding hand like this. So I think open shoving is going to be the optimal line. And here we'll line check. We can try to go here for bet line because I think he will call the turn very often with like most AX hands, but if he has not hit the queen or slow played some monster, I think I will get a huge amount of folds here. Well, he had hit the queen, so then it's not going to be working. But I still think it's okay. Okay, up some tier. Another option is to just check fold the turn if he bets. And in here with the queen then suited, definitely shoving. I don't have this bonsai marked, but I think he's a reg. Might just be that I haven't played recently with him and don't have much of sample. With the ace in hand, I mean, if he does have some decent 8x, for example, I think he might take such a line because it's quite often that I don't have much better hand. But it's also pretty nice opportunity for him to be bluffing because I have checked 3 times. And then here versus unknown, I would be shoving any two pretty much. And in here with really short stack, I don't really mind to be folding a lot of my range. And 6-7 shoving. I think this spot is actually decent for him to be chip leader to be shoving because when the BB is this short, he can assume that the chip leader doesn't necessarily get that much out of line. And with 3 and the adjusted, I think any king is decent, not really great to be shoving king deuce off, but the likelihood that they are folding quite a lot, it's not bad really. Here I could actually try limping because if I raise here, it's pretty nice spot to be for PP to be shoving quite a lot. So I like to be. Well, this is quite weird. Again, pretty hard to believe him. When he does that sort of lie, I'm definitely checking the turn or pot control mostly. In here on the river, I think it's pretty unlikely that he would be bluffing, so it would be kind of ugly if he had bet a big here. But I don't think there's much reason to be betting in the. Wow. No idea why he takes. Okay, straight comes in, but he's definitely not planning to fold anyway if I bet turn bet river, I think so. And in here, this might be again trapped when he goes like for a race like this, but again if he had shoved I would definitely be ISO shoving, so without some sort of note on the wheel line I tend to be playing pretty much same as versus shove here. And Horse Hero asking why don't I use Tournament Shark. Here I could actually go for limp and go. Yeah, it's trapped. Limp and go and try to get him fold few more hands. But if I shove on the pre-flop, he's not folding anything, so doesn't hurt to try. I'm not actually sure what Tournament Shark is, so probably some Sharkscope related software. In here we are pretty much, we can't really do anything without good hand with our middle stack. Then yeah, Jack, unknown player. There's a lot of draws here, so I'm going to see bet, planning to fold if he check raises. Versus if I know that the opponent is more aggro, I would prefer to be just checking the flop behind, because then it's much more tricky if he get check raised. And here King 8 is practically blocker steal, or of course they might be flatting with weaker hands. It has some playability still, so it's not total disaster if they call. Let's actually move to this position. Nine ten suited I would be shoved versus the open race, and when it's unopened here I'm going to be shoving. Basically last option I would choose is to min raise, because if we face a 3-bet shove we have to be folding, which we really don't want to do with hand like that. So other option would be limping and mainly limp shoving if he raises small. And suited ace here, pretty standard to be shoving with these stacks. Got lucky this time. And in here I could actually try to go for team play. Big blind is going to be, CC should be folding anything, and usually it goes just checked if, well actually when I hit here pretty nice, I'm going to be betting for protection mostly. because it's still in this sort of flop when we hit like that we are in good shape versus the small stack. It's pretty bad, or it's not great for our equity to be giving cards for the other player. Pretty ugly spot here again, early position facing 3-bet. I think shoving or flatting are actually quite close of each other. Versus unknown, I don't really like to be folding. Well, that was nasty again. And another bubble situation. Pocket fours. I would usually actually open shove in villain shoes, but Minres calling is option also. Main problem with it is basically that if I flat, and I will have quite a decent amount of flatting range there, it's going to be ugly playing post flop basically. And I think also like inducing with pocket fours is also not that great overall, because really active looking player. This is actually quite close, I would say, because we are smallest stack, and if he's really active, he's going to be shoving all the time, and we rarely get, because this is great, like perfect for this chip leader to be shoving like in the next hand any two. So if we don't take this pot, which is still going to be pretty okay, we are really often going to be in trouble in few hands. ICM wise, I would say that it's pretty close, whatever it's calling spot or not. And good evening for Kauris. More tables. And in here, very active players so far. We are really short stack, so let's just go with the suited ace. And also check the Twitch chat, and hello for Banderos from there. Seems to be quite silent day on the mid stake and high stake 9 maxis now. But maybe we get one $30 running also. King 7 off. Quite active player. I could actually try to be 3-betting here. King 7 is kind of a, and I don't necessarily love to be flatting here, but versus decently active player, I think folding is also a bit weak. Like if it was suited, I would be more happy to be flatting in general. And pretty weird spot for villain to be shoving pretty much anything. Anything really. Should be just flatting, basically flatting all his range, which he want to be continuing. Ace 10 here. We have backdoor flush. Not the worst flop to see, but even versus two opponents. And that is pretty much one of the worst turn cards to be barreling. Just going to be folding if he bets here. And in here it's kind of, well, it's okay to be c-betting, and versus one player I would tend to be, if they raise, to go with the hand. It's also okay to check the flop in the Quetzal's hand. But when there is flush draw also, so there is more hands which can give us value, then it makes the c-bet a bit better. And in here it's quite tough to get calls from weaker hands if I bet the flop, because 3x probably not that much in the villain range. Here I'm just going to bet the half pot and shove the river if he calls. Unless it would have been like some jack or queen, then it would have been better to check. Or maybe king. So I will be playing probably registering games to somewhere like 2250 or 10 15 over 10 p.m. in the Finnish time, and 10 stop registration, and play through the games and then go for analyzing. With the ace king it was okay to see, but because the player looked like someone who is likely playing really wide ranges, and here I'm going to be donk betting pretty big, because if I check here, the open raiser usually doesn't see bet liked here, so I want to protect my hand and I really don't want to see the flop checked, and I continue betting big. Ace is pretty decent card, and in here Jacks does give the straight, but this is best spot in my opinion to be shoving, because if villain has some two pairs, he's often going to be calling, and I can't really be check folding when there's so little behind. And that was pretty setup situation. Because if I check, then the better hands like straight will definitely shove the river anyway. So if he has a flush, then straight, then it doesn't really matter. And in here, let's bet and try to get bluff catch from some weaker full house. And he actually played the board and called. $30 game started. Kind of interesting spot. Because I think this sort of player will call quite wide, and we can have decent amount of fold equity. Even though from pot odds wise he shouldn't be folding much, but might be. And if that happens, we get really great situation versus the wide range from the open shower. Good night for Danita. And here VP seems really active, but sample is small. Shoving is going to be profitable. I don't with this sort of info on the villain, I don't love the idea of min raising that much. Limping would also be okay, and here ace 9 is going to be good enough versus Reki guy with that shallow stack. And ace 5 offsuit I'm going to be shoving if it's unopened, and probably shoving if someone limps. At least if it's some fishy looking guy. And in here with the 7-9 I'm definitely going to be calling versus the min raise. and not going to continue. Even if he had bet really small, I would be folding. In here, shoving might actually be quite close with this 7-4, but it's pretty thin anyway. And usually from late position I like to be ISO racing with pretty wide range versus most limpers, whatever they are from early position or mid position. Because you all tend to get the positional advantage, and usually players who are limping are going to be somewhat weak. This is again flop which I can be c betting. It's not that connected, and I do have backdoor flush which I can be, like if this was 5 of diamonds I would be barreling the turn, but when it isn't, I don't have that much equity with my hand to be double barreling, and 5 is not going to be scare card for villain range, so. And definitely calling with the kings. 5-4, and there it hits. This is again like worst card on the deck overall. It's not going to be. We can get some A high sort of hands to fold, but not really much else. And this guy min raise is pretty tough to be folding. And I'm calling here. He might have some AX heart, which he might have been. Yeah, he had the nuts on the turn, but did give us really great pot odds. And on the bubble here on the bottom table, here when he donks, I'm definitely just calling and trying to keep his range as wide as possible. There's really no reason to be protecting, because if he has a flush draw, killed our hand. If he has a flush draw, he's never folding if I raise the flop. So that sort of is like, we might give some gutshots free, like cheaper up, option to be drawing against us, but that's not really a problem. And here betting half pot, or maybe like a bit over. Something that is flush draws would usually be calling, because I don't mind him drawing with when I have the absolute or second nuts. And kind of setup situation. Pocket 6 is really draw with boards, so flops, so let's go for big sizing and shoving the turn. Ace 4. Would be a pretty nice spot to be shoving. But flatting is okay also. He had been somewhat tight earlier, so, or at least now recently. I'm going to call once here. It's pretty dry board, so he's probably c-betting his fold range, or most of it. Now question is it better to check, or is it better to be bluffing, turning into bluff? And I think it's pretty tough to get much of better hands to be folding. Like maybe we get some better ace highs to fold, but might not be much else. If the flush draw had come in, then I think turning the hand into bluff would have been much better. And in here with the bottom table, if the small blind understands the situation, he has to be pretty tight, so shoving that sort of hand is okay. And definitely calling king jack. And here I'm hoping to induce him, because I have been raising every time on his big blind. This sort of hand should be actually pretty much bottom of his calling range. And this is pretty standard again to be c-betting. There is decent amount, or some turn counts we can pretty nicely continue betting. It's pretty unlikely he has much here, so I'm actually going to be double barreling the turn. Yeah, well, again kind of weird spot to be raising, but it's quite risky to be shoving over his win raise also. Basically he was repping that he has 10x or better, and it's questionable whatever 10x would be raising. Willow has been tight here, but stack wise this is pretty perfect situation to be re-stealing, and it does have decent equity even if we are called. River was not our friend. And definitely solving 9-8. And good call from the villain. Ace 8, I'm not going to be shoving versus this button player. I don't think his range is going to be wide enough. And here C betting and of course going in on the flop if people want with such monster draw. We are basically ahead of almost everything. And in here, pretty tight looking player, but it's actually pretty nice that this more fishy looking guy calls, so it does make our shove better. If he had just been there, if there had been no other player, I would be actually just calling the 3-bet. Queens is simply too strong in this spot to be folding at least. And the point is that if we call here and then go broke like on like any every time we have overpair, we are still going to be losing. Still going to be losing against the bigger pockets, so there's not much point from that perspective. And when if we call here we can lose value from the unknown guy or the fishy looking guy, because he can then when we shove he can be calling with lot worse hands. Still have 8 tables, so I'm probably not registering new ones anymore. And pocket 6 is here. This is better spot to be opening because we can call those big smaller stacks here. Like these four of the smallest stacks we can be raise calling, so it's better than compared to situation that everyone would have like 10 pp or more. And in that situation I would not be opening pocket sixes. And Jack Queen calling the button shove. If the small blind had been raised, I would have. And in here, King 6 is not going to be quite in as range, I would say, but versus these guys it should be okay. Unfortunately, he had a monster here. Basically, if we don't hit the queen, there's no point really to be betting here. That was pretty fishy call from the small blind. Doesn't make any sense even if the button is very short. Pretty silent chat this time. And in here, Ace Jack is not going to be that great versus early position opener. And if we call here, actually, if I want to play here, I would like more about small 3-bet. Because if we flat here and someone shoves behind, we pretty much have to be folding, and it does make shoving much better for players behind if we flat. And King 9 off is not going to be good enough. And like that Ace Jack spot, that if we want to have a 3-bet bluffing range, then usually the hand should be ones that are not quite strong enough to be flatting, so that we would be folding, but then we can also turn them into 3-bet bluffs. And why it is okay is because hands like in that spot Ace Jack, it has blocker value pretty nicely. And 5-4 suited, I'm definitely shoving if the button folds. Well, that would have been bad timing. And King Jack again, we can fold against these 3 bigger stacks if they shove and call the smaller ones. Well, good that someone is still listening. Queen 8 off. If it was suited, I would be shoving. And versus 2 players, I am not going to be c-betting. And this is kind of folding for spot now with the other small stack. Really trashy ace again is not really something we can profitably shove. Suited ace I would have been shoving. And pretty easy spot to be shoving here with the ace 8. Actually, like any ace would be nuts, basically. And this one I'm definitely shoving if it's unopened. And like in this situation, if PP would have more chips than me, then it would be decent idea to make non all in so that I can still fold if both villains go all in. Here I ISO 3-bet really small, but PP called. If there would be a bit more on the side, but I would be c-betting here, but with this little I think it's okay to be also just check folding, because the villain range is going to be decently strong usually. And in here, well, aggression factor is really high, but he also we also have really small sample, so I prefer to be c-betting here. I'm going with the hand because the board is relatively drawy. And queen jack. In here, shoving this deep is not really an option, but folding would be a bit tight also. Ugly part is just that if the big blind shoves, it's kind of crying call with the antes, I would say, but it's not. It's really not that great situation. And king 8, I'm in raising and calling the big blind. Now it's a bit trickier, but if the big blind shoves here, I'm probably going to be ISO shoving, because the small blind will usually fold almost every time. Almost every time, but of course sometimes he's calling. The big blind had not been 3-betting, so it's decent spot to be just min raising. Here I don't really like to be shoving this deep with ace-7, and it's not like the greatest of limping hands, but the problem is that if this active player shoves, the hand is not really great. It's not really great to be calling either. And pocket queens, half pot behind. I'm definitely not check folding. King shouldn't hit really that much of his range, so I think, well, pretty nasty flop. And ace, I could actually try to min raise and try to increase my fold equity basically. Well, now the villain shouldn't be folding anything on the flop basically with those both odds. But that shows that if I had, for example, 6-7 suited or something like that, it would be pretty nice idea to be min raising also, because then we can get a lot better hands to be folding also when they do fold something, which is of course basically a mistake, even if they don't hit. And here with the king, any king with that sort of stack depth is going to be profitable. Profitable opens up from small blind. And in this situation, if this PP had been more tight looking player, this would be really nice spot to be shoving, but here if the button guy adjusts to this situation, then it's not really that great shove spot. And 8 jack, I'm shoving. And in here with the ace 9 we can actually c bet small here, and it's in practice it's a value bet. Of course if he has trapped us, he's going to be getting the value, but anything else than trap has not hit here, and he shouldn't have really like any pocket pairs outside of trapping in his flatting range. Min rest 7's UTG. Well, I don't remember the spot anymore, but we can check it later. Here is actually also kind of interesting situation, that is this hand good to shove or not? And because the main problem is that the button is so short here, and I think this big blind guy can be calling too wide here. Well, ace jack I'm definitely going to be playing. Definitely going to be playing. And in here we can go for non-all in play. Yeah, it was. Yeah, I actually think I remember the situation now. I think the sevens were pretty close overall. Here we can actually think of limping, but I'm just going to be folding the trashy ace. In that situation I would have, at least with nines, I would have gone all in. And definitely nines, ace, queen plus, at least. I think sevens is bit too weak. Bit too weak to be playing for stacks here. And this player who limps here he showed early on this other table that he called with pretty crappy hands, so I think he's very often with weak range here when he limps. And here I don't want to be shoving, I want to take it into post flop, and basically if he shoves here I'm in pretty cocky situation. Well, now he had the kings. Yeah. Because there is one more player behind me and he's probably not shoving like all of his range. Here we have another bubble situation. Now this is always kind of ugly that we are our direct left is the chip leader, because it's always risky for us to be shoving. And in this situation, it's pretty close pot. In here I could actually try small raise. Small raise. It's just very nice pot to be shoving when we get through them, because we had so even stack on the two other small stacks, so it's really nice pot, like reward risk wise overall. And a7 definitely shoving. In three-handed I don't usually go for non-all in plays anymore, because or especially when the blinds are that way that the big blind is smaller. And king queen is definitely a call, pretty much versus anyone. Then 4, usually I like to be min raising really wide in heads up at start and see how the villain reacts. Because quite many players overall are going to be folding too much to min raise, and if they don't 3-bet much, then we also often get profitable situations post flop. And 9 queen is going to be profitable to shove here. And as default, I tend to be shoving any king X in this sort of situation, because players are going to be usually folding really high amount here. And in here, like bottom pocket pair would be like pocket sixes. And in here, not quite as good flop as before, but we have 0 equity with our hand, so it's okay to see bet small. This is actually quite interesting interesting turn card because Villain shouldn't have AX in his range. So I actually try to double barrel here. And I think shoving or making it like 1800 is going to have quite close to same fold equity, so it's a lot better to be making smaller raise if we assume same sort of fold equity. And we are in direct bubble situation. This villain has been really loose, so I like to be shoving here with the ace 10. It's bottom of my range though, so weaker offsuit aces I would be definitely folding. Because in the bubble situation we don't want to be too wide in taking these sort of quite risky moves. And versus regular this would be much more ugly situation because they tend to be having. Actually here also I could just raise my absolute trashy hand because this sort of player VPIP brief of praise 90-20 is not that often. It's not that often like limp calling in those situations, so we really rarely end up in horse loop situations. Okay, so 3 table left. And in here we don't have much. Jack High doesn't have that much showdown value. But if I had like King 9 I would definitely call here. Queen 10 is okay to limp. I don't really like to be min-raise folding, and min-raise calling would be quite tricky also. Of course limping has a bad side that we give the villain free flop, and min-raising would have been fine without read that villain is really aggro. And Queen Jack I'm pretty happy to be playing post flop here. It has nice playability. When the villain limps he's unlikely to have ace, so it doesn't matter that much to me. Of course now he's repping that he has ace in his hand. Ace doesn't really change that situation. You have to we have to remember in those situations that we don't have to be that often right when he makes a half pot c-bet, because it's just like if we are good 1 out of 4 times we are already in good shape. And in here let's move it here, min raising. And on the right table I'm definitely calling if the villain bets. Well, if he makes like shove it's kind of ugly, but. And this week offsuit aces are always going to be profitable to shove in these situations, and it's often better to be shoving than min raise calling because the hand doesn't have that much equity. Like if the villain has some jack 10 he's shoving, he will be like 45% equity wise. It's just that this sort of player he has been playing really wide ranges and he's now prepping that he has a queen. Well, unfortunately he had other nutty hand, but it's just so likely that he's just fooling around on the flop with many weaker hands. And with pocket tens, pretty happy to be shoving. With bit higher pocket pairs we can think of maybe min raising or just checking. But after I get this one to the end, let's check some of those hands I have marked, and for example that 7th hand Christian asked. So shutting down the poker stars, let's check the results also. Doesn't matter really, but for the coachings it's nice to be showing these as well. I think someone might be interested. So pretty much break even with over EV. EV in dollar wise. Not the greatest of sessions, but doesn't really matter. So marked hands. So this really loose player open raised here, and I shoved the ace 10. Ace 10 on the bubble. He was raising the 3 PP actually. So if his range is this tight, we can't be shoving the ace 10. Ace 10, but I think also that his range was likely to be wider from what he had showed so far. And from his flatting range, I don't think we can make it tighter than this at least. So with those assumptions, it would be quite bit profitable. If he calls wider, then it becomes quite quickly break or weaker. But I think he's going to be opening 33% quite easily overall. Well, he had been for the pocket eights hand. He had been really active pre-flop at least. And here it's going to be profitable with all aces, but I wouldn't shove these weakest aces in this situation. Usually, at least when there was, I think that chip leader was pretty fishy looking guy, so he might be calling a bit wider also. But still, ace 8 would be decently good with these assumptions. And king 7 suited I chose to fold here. And this sort of hand is best to look through with FGS higher than 1, because we are interested about how the button small stack affect the situation. This shouldn't take long with these few players anyway. So if villain is calling this tight, then it's going to be profitable still, but I think this would be quite optimistic. It's tough to say because often in blind versus blind, busy players are not calling enough, but then again he has a huge big stack here. So if we think about some sort of like in general outside of ICM heavy situations, villains are usually calling here with most aces. So if he calls like 21%, then it should be pretty bad for us to be shoving the king 7 suited. So I think folding here is totally fine. And then there was this ace 9 suited situation. And we can check in, for example, with FGS1 that what are the basic ranges. So if he's shoving any two ace 10 suited would be bottom. He did show 6-5 offsuit, if I remember correctly. Yeah, so he's probably going to be shoving pretty close to any two, if not any two. And even with this result, I think shoving or calling the ace 9 is okay if we have a read that chip leader is really active. Mostly because we can actually check that how the FGS changed the situation if we put into 3. Because we are in a really ugly situation with shorter stack here with the chip leader on our left, who is really active because he's going to be playing huge amount of hands. And actually here with FGS3 we can see that he's still shoving any 2, but now our calling range is much wider. So if he's playing future hands with Nash ranges, which is going to be pretty much any 2, then we don't get open raise situations, and we are going to still need a good hand to be calling, and that's why we can actually call much wider than with FGS1. So yeah, that was okay call. And we can actually check that pocket sevens, and I think it was there probably isn't that many pocket sevens in our session overall, so we can just use simple filter. So it was probably here. Well, in this situation, I might, if I had this sort of stats, I might have looked at 3-bet stat, maybe also a bit too heavily, because if Villain has playing 45-31, it's quite likely that he's going to be wider than his 3-bet stats in itself would suggest. So even this pocket sevens, well, there is two smaller stacks, but this is far from bubble. I think in NAS pocket sevens can actually be pretty close, but in general I think it's going to be a bit too wide to be calling. But like pocket nines are definitely call versus active player. And yeah, it's okay, would be okay call if villain is shoving this sort of range. And well, we can tighten and look where is the break even. Like if I think about kind of standard sort of range, he might be folding maybe weakest pocket pairs. Usually people are not giving enough value for these suited Broadway hands as a shoving hands. So if it's something like this, how does it look then? Yeah, then it will start to be unprofitable, but we can see here that like pocket nines are still going to be really profitable, and ace queen are going to be great. So if we make really tight range, then the nines maybe start to be the losing side. So if we don't think that the wheel line is really tight, we should be definitely raise calling pocket nines. And pocket sevens would not be unreasonable either. Did we have any other hands which raised questions? Of course the pocket 8, I could actually post that into hand analyze area also. Ah yeah, I had the wrong open sizing. Sorry about that. Well, it does make the calling range of course bit tighter. But still, if he's shoving a wide range, and here we can see that NAS ranges would assume wider stealing range when facing a min raise, so let's make it again something that someone with tighter might be using. So in this scenario, still nines ace queen off would be really borderline. But I think this sort of range for someone who somewhat understands the re-steal idea, it's pretty common that these hands will be in the shoving range. Because in this situation, calling from small blind is not going to be that great. Because then BP can get cheaply into pot, or the situation becomes better for the big blind to be shoving if small blind flats here. For example, if he has like king 10 suited, for example, he might want to play it, but shoving would be the better play pretty much always if it's profitable to play. And if the open raiser is really tight, then it would be likely best to just fold. But yeah, if there's no other questions, I think we can stop this coaching. And on Sunday, I might have another coaching, or Arnimetsa might have, but it's open question now. And next week Thursday I will have the same coaching as Finnish in Finnish side and so on. So thanks for commenting and watching the coaching. Bye.